It's 7:14 inches the morning. You're already running late. You slide into the driver's seat, you put your foot on the brake, and you turn the key, or you push that overpriced little button, and what do you hear? Nothing. No crank, no turnover, no sweet sound of pistons firing up. Just one sound, one ugly, lonely, soul-crushing sound from under the hood. Click, that's it. The whole dashboard lights up like a Christmas tree. The radio is fine. The headlights are blasting. But the engine? Dead. Paralyzed. And in that exact second, in 2026, with gas prices, what they are, and the cost of living strangling every household in this country, your stomach drops into your shoes. Because you know what's coming next. You know exactly what's coming. You're about to get robbed in broad daylight, and the guy doing the robbing is wearing a clean polo shirt with a logo on it. You call the tow truck. That's already $200 before anyone has even looked at the car. The truck hauls your vehicle to the local dealership, the Stealership as I call them, and the service advisor comes out with that same rehearsed sad face they all learn in scammer school. He says the exact words. He says your starter motor has suffered a catastrophic internal electrical burnout. He says the heavy-duty copper windings are fried. He says we need to replace the entire starter assembly, and while we're in there, we should probably do the heavy-duty relays too. And then he hands you the quote, $800. Sometimes $900, sometimes over $1,000 if you drive anything European. And you sign it because what choice do you have? You need to get to work. You need to feed your family. You're being held hostage by a part that, and I cannot stress this enough, is almost certainly completely fine. I'm going to say that again because the dealerships do not want you to hear it. Your starter motor, 90% of the time when this happens, is perfectly fine. It is mechanically and electrically intact. What you just paid $800 to replace was a piece of stuck carbon. Carbon dust. That's it. That's the whole crime. The dealerships making billions off your morning panic want you to think starter motors are delicate computer chips. They aren't. They are heavy-duty industrial electromagnets designed in Japan in the 70s to last the lifetime of the vehicle. But as always, I'm sharing this for educational purposes, as historical mechanical observation, so you can understand the physics of what is actually happening inside that metal cylinder bolted to your engine block. Smash the like button right now if you've ever been quoted over $500 for a starter. Just smash it. Because what I'm about to show you is going to make you furious. Let me walk you through this. Let me show you the actual engineering, because once you understand it, you can never be lied to again. Inside that starter motor, there are essentially three things working together, and the Japanese engineers at companies like Denso and Mitsubishi Electric figured this out half a century ago. The first component is the solenoid. The solenoid is the little cylinder sitting on top of the starter, and its job is twofold. When you turn the key, a small amount of current goes to the solenoid, which is just a fancy electromagnet. That electromagnet does two things at once. It physically pushes a small gear, called the pinion gear, forward so it meshes with the big toothed ring on your engine's flywheel. And at the same time, it closes a massive internal switch that allows hundreds of amps of battery current to flow into the main motor. That, by the way, is the click. That single click you hear in the morning, that is the solenoid doing its job perfectly. It is engaging the gear, it is closing the high amperage contacts, it is screaming at the motor to spin. So if you hear a click, your solenoid is alive. Your battery is alive. Your wiring is alive. The problem is downstream. Now the second component, this is where the magic and the scam both live. The main motor itself. Inside this motor, you have what's called an armature. The armature is a heavy chunk of iron wrapped in copper windings, and it sits inside a magnetic field. When you pump electricity into those copper windings, the armature spins violently, and that spinning is what turns your engine over. But here's the question. How does the electricity get into a piece of metal that is spinning at thousands of RPM? You can't just solder a wire to it. The wire would rip off in half a second. So the engineers came up with a beautiful solution. They use what are called brushes. Not paint brushes. These are small rectangular blocks of carbon, usually 2 of them, sometimes 4 in heavy-duty applications, and they are pressed against the spinning shaft by little springs. The carbon block conducts electricity from a stationary wire into a copper plate on the spinning shaft called the commutator. The commutator is just a segmented copper ring divided into little pie slices, and as it spins, the brushes drag against it and feed it current in the exact right sequence to keep the magnetic fields pushing the armature around. It is genius. It is simple. It has been the same design since basically the 1920s. Now, here is where the dealerships make their money. Carbon brushes wear down. That's their job. As they drag against the commutator over years and years and 100,000 starts, they slowly grind themselves into dust. Carbon dust. Fine, black, conductive carbon dust. And this dust does not just disappear, it accumulates inside the brush holder, which is a little metal box that guides the brush and holds the spring behind it. Over time, that dust packs in. It gets compressed, it gets greasy from the heat, and the brush, instead of sliding freely down against the commutator under spring pressure, gets jammed, it gets stuck. It hangs up 0.5 millimeter away from the copper, and 0.5 millimeter of air is an infinite electrical resistance. The circuit is broken. Now I want you to think about what happens next, mechanically, when you turn that key. The battery sends 12 volts to the solenoid. The solenoid energizes. It physically slams the pinion gear into the flywheel, you hear that as the click, and it closes the big internal contact that should send 300 amps into the motor. Those 300 amps travel down the cable, they hit the brush holder, and they slam into a wall of compressed carbon dust and a stuck brush. The electricity has nowhere to go. The armature does not spin. The engine does not crank. And you sit there in the driver's seat on a Tuesday morning with one click ringing in your ears, completely paralyzed, while the dealership a few miles away is already counting the $800 they're about to take from you. So what does the old school master mechanic do? What does the guy in the back of the shop with grease under his fingernails, the guy who learned this from his father, who learned it from his father, what does he do? He uses physics. He uses the same principle that's been kicking jukeboxes back to life since 1950. He grabs a hammer, or a heavy wrench, or a solid piece of 2x4, and he locates the starter motor. On most cars, it's down low on the side of the engine where the transmission bolts on. You can usually see the cylindrical metal body of it from underneath. He has a friend or his partner sit in the driver's seat. He says, "When I tell you to, turn the key to the start position and hold it." Then he gets under there and he winds up and he delivers 3 to 5 sharp, solid, deliberate strikes directly to the metal casing of the starter. Not the solenoid, not the wires, the main barrel of the motor itself. Bang, bang, bang. And almost every single time on the second or third strike, you hear it. The engine roars to life, cranks beautifully, idles smooth, as if nothing was ever wrong, because nothing was ever wrong. The kinetic shock from the hammer travels through the metal casing, it vibrates the inside of that brush holder, and that compressed carbon dust shakes loose. The stuck brush, which was being pushed by its little spring the whole time, suddenly has room to move. It snaps forward, slams against the commutator, and electrical contact is instantly restored. 300 amps of current pour into the armature, the magnetic fields engage, and the motor spins. An $800 nightmare, plus a $200 tow, plus a half day off work, plus the stress, plus the humiliation, plus the betrayal, all of it, bypassed by a piece of primitive physics that costs $0. Now I'm going to tell you something else, because I know what the comments are going to say. Someone is going to say, well, isn't that just a temporary fix? And the answer is yes and no. Yes, in the sense that if your brushes are genuinely worn to nothing, eventually you'll have to address them. But here's the secret the Stealerships will never tell you. A brand new set of carbon brushes, the same brushes used in your Toyota or Honda or Nissan starter, costs about $8 to $15 on the open parts market. $15 versus $800. That is a 53 times markup, 5,300% profit margin. And if you're handy, you can pull the starter, pop the end cap off, slide the old brushes out, slide the new ones in, and reassemble the whole thing in about 45 minutes. You don't even need to replace the motor, you don't need to replace the solenoid, you don't need the heavy-duty relays, you need $15 worth of carbon. That's it. And let me tell you why I am so angry about this in 2026 specifically. Because in this economy, with the inflation we've been through, with the price of eggs and gas and rent, the average family does not have a spare $1,000 sitting around for a phantom starter motor. These dealerships have built their entire service department business model on the panic of a paralyzed car on a Tuesday morning. They know you can't say no. They know you have to be at work. They know the tow truck is already there. And they exploit your ignorance of basic mechanical engineering to extract $800 from your bank account for a problem that, in many cases, a Japanese taxi driver in 1980 would have fixed in 30 seconds with the wooden handle of a screwdriver. Drop a comment right now. I want to hear it. Tell me the most insane diagnostic quote you've ever gotten from a dealership. I read every single one of these comments, and the patterns I'm seeing across the country are staggering. Now, I want to be very clear because the trolls love to come at me on this. Am I telling you to never replace your starter? No. Am I telling you the hammer trick is a permanent solution? No. What I am telling you is that you have the right, as the owner of that vehicle, to understand what is actually happening inside it. You have the right to a second opinion. You have the right to know that a single click in the morning is not, repeat, Not. A catastrophic electrical burnout in 90% of cases. It is almost always stuck brushes. And the test, the diagnostic test that costs you nothing, takes 30 seconds and definitively tells you whether you've been scammed, is the hammer test. If the engine cranks after 3 taps, your starter is fine. The dealership lied. Period. The Japanese engineers who designed these things built them to last. They built them tough. They built them with replaceable wear components specifically so you would never have to throw away the whole assembly. The fact that an entire industry in the West has decided to ignore that design philosophy and instead sell you a new $800 unit every time a 15-cent piece of carbon gets stuck, that is the scam. That is the cover-up. That is what I am exposing on this channel, day after day after day. So the next time you turn that key and you hear that one ugly, lonely click, before you call the tow truck, before you sign that quote, before you hand over your hard-earned money, remember what I told you today. Pop the hood, find the starter, grab something heavy, and tap it. 3 times, 5 times. Let physics do what physics has been doing for 100 years. And if it cranks, you just saved yourself $1,000. If it doesn't, fine, call the tow truck. But at least you'll know. At least you won't be a victim of ignorance. Subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, and share this video with every single person you know who drives a car. Because this knowledge belongs to you, it belongs to all of us. And the dealerships have buried it for far too long. I'll see you in the next